Hello fellow Americans, I'm here to tell you that the time to fight is near. You sit there watching your YouTube while feeling hopeless to what's happening in the world, thinking that you are powerless to the powerful and rich, nurturing a culture of doubts and denials.
Washington, the richest city in America. We want to thank you for that, for sending your tax dollars here. It's built a pretty nice place. Well, Bill Nye the Science Guy is now aspiring to a new title, Bill Nye the Psychoanalyst Guy. During a Facebook Live event with Senator Bernie Sanders today, the mechanical engineer and TV personality said, skeptics of global warming suffer from the psychological delusion of cognitive dissonance. It's a slight bump up from last year when he was open to the idea of imprisoning skeptics, global warming, as war criminals. Is that the choice? Bellevue or Nuremberg? Bill Nye joins us now. Bill, it's great to see you. That doesn't sound like science to me, Bill Nye the Science Guy. That sounds like something very different.
So cognitive dissonance is not a delusion. It's a feature. It's human nature. So we in the science community are looking for an explanation why climate change deniers, or extreme skeptics, do not accept the overwhelming scientific evidence for climate change. And the most reasonable explanation is you have a worldview, and then you have evidence, and the evidence disagrees with your worldview, so you deny the evidence. And then along with that, you deny the authorities that are providing the evidence. Now, if you have a better hypothesis for why climate deniers deny the overwhelming scientific evidence, bring it on. It's not a delusion. It's just like the fox and the grapes.
Well,
he can't reach the grapes, so he says the grapes are no good.
Look, people do come to every debate with preconceptions, and you're right about that, of course. But the essence of science is extreme skepticism. We always ought to be asking ourselves, is my hypothesis true?
I'm a member of both skeptic organizations, Mr. Carlson, and this is climate change denial is denial. The evidence is overwhelming. Don't get me wrong. I love you as a person more than life itself, but the evidence for climate change is overwhelming. So we are looking for an explanation of why you guys are having so much trouble with it.
So slow down. Before the name calling begins, and before you try to end the conversation, let's start it by asking what exactly you mean. Now, I think most people are open to the idea that the climate is changing. It has always changed, by the way, as you know.
It's the rate, Mr. Carlson. It's the rate that's such a concern.
The core question, from what I can tell, is why the change? Is it part of the endless cycle of climate change, or is human activity causing it? That seems to be the debate to me, and it seems an open question, not a settled question, to what degree human activity is causing that. Is that not an open question?
It's not an open question. It's a settled question. Human activity is causing climate change.
To what degree?
To a degree that it's a very serious problem in the next few decades.
Wait, stop. Wait, no, you said it's a settled point, and I'm asking a very precise question.
It's a settled point.
Okay, then if you'll elucidate it for me, I'd be grateful. To what degree is climate change caused by human activity? Is 100% of climate change is caused by human activity? Is it 74.3%? It's settled science. Please tell us to what degree human activity is responsible.
So the word degree is a word that you chose. But the speed that climate change is happening is caused by humans. Instead of happening on timescales of millions of years, or let's say 15,000 years, it's happening on the timescale of decades and now years. Now, you know, I offered...
Wait, but hold on. But to what extent is human activity responsible for speeding that up? I mean, please be more precise.
If that's the number you want. Humans are causing it to happen catastrophically fast.
Okay, so at what rate would it have changed without human activity? And you look annoyed that I'm asking these questions, but they're very basic questions. They're not denial.
So basically, the cycles of climate change, the last ice age we had was tens of thousands of years ago. So bear in mind that in ancient dinosaur days, there was more carbon dioxide. The world was warmer than it is now. There was an inland sea in what is now Wyoming, and I understand you have a member of Congress from Colorado, used to be underwater, and you go to Dinosaur National Mine, you can see it. Okay,
yes.
But that's millions of years ago. The problem is the rate.
You just said it was tens of thousands.
That was the ice age. The rate. The rate is the problem. Now here's the thing: half the people in the world live on sea coasts. As we get the ocean a little bit warmer, the ocean's going to expand, and people who live on the sea coast are going to be displaced.
But you're not answering my question.
About the speed yes,
you're describing what will happen if this continues. And I'm asking you a simple question. Hold on. I'm asking you a simple question about the rate of climate change.
So the rate.
You said that it would be happening, but that rate has accelerated because of human activity. And I'm asking you very simply.
The word accelerated is an understatement. Okay, it's happening extraordinarily
I'm asking you a simple
fast.
question. And because the science is settled, I hope you can answer it in simple terms, which is, without human activity, how long would it have taken for us to reach this level of warmth in our climate?
It's not clear that it would have happened. In other words, humans have changed the climate so drastically that we have almost certainly avoided another ice age. There would have been another ice age, ain't going to happen because of you and me. So the sooner we get to work on this problem, the problem.
When would it have happened?
When would the next ice age have happened?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Without human activity, what would the process... Look, here's the point that I hope our viewers can understand. I'm not in any way denying that the climate is changing. I'm utterly open to the possibility that the change is caused by man's activity. I'm merely calling into question your claim that all of this is settled, that we know precisely what is happening and why, and that anyone who asks pointed questions about it is a denier and ought to be imprisoned or shouted off the stage.
No, that was your word. That's you guys. That's not my claim, and I really.
Would you like me to read your quote that people who disagree with you ought to potentially go to jail? You said that.
Okay.
And I'm just saying,
I'm not sure that's exactly what I said, Mr.
science?
Carlson. We can talk about that shortly, but.
Is it appropriate to jail the guys from Enron? Was it appropriate to jail the people in the cigarette industry who promised it wasn't addictive, et cetera?
Okay.
Look, my only point is, shouldn't we be encouraging people to ask honest questions, which I am doing, and you don't seem to have the answers to those questions.
Okay, I got to disagree with you. I claim I do have the answers.
Okay.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Why aren't you concerned about it? Don't you have 4 children? Why aren't you concerned about climate change?
That's why I'm having you on. Look, you don't reach correct conclusions in science or politics or any other field unless you can ask honest answers without being shouted down by people like you.
But I know what you mean. So
no, I do mean ask. I want to know what would happen without human activity. The climate change. No, it's a simple question. The climate is always changing. You've conceded that. You're saying that human activity has increased the speed.
Yeah.
Increases the speed of that change. And my point is, what would the climate look like right now without human activity?
It would have looked like it did in 1750. Britain would not be very well suited to growing. Yes, Britain would not be very well suited to growing grapes as it is today. French winemakers would not be buying land to the north as they are now. People who plan to run ski resorts would still be able to do it in Europe. And so the climate change and the parasites.
You're using the language of politics. Look, you're not a scientist, as you know. You're a popularizer,
and I just think, and that's fine. Of economics.
But so I'm just saying, look, to the extent that you prevent people, if you prevent people from having an honest conversation, you're doing a grave disservice to science. Don't you think that?
So you asked how long it would be before, what the climate would be like if humans weren't involved right now. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right.
So
at what point would it have changed? And I'm just saying, you don't actually know because it's unknowable.
So
why aren't you open to questions?
To interrupt me, okay? It takes you quite a bit less than 6 seconds. So the climate would be like it was in 1750. And the economics would be that you could not grow wine-worthy grapes in Britain as you can today because the climate is changing. The use of pesticides in the Midwest would not be increasing because the parasites are showing up sooner, or the pests are showing up sooner and hanging around longer.
I think that's probably all true, but you
would not be overwhelmed by pine bark beetles as it is because of climate change. That's how the world would be different if it weren't for humans.
You pretend that you know, but you don't know, and you bully people who ask you questions.
I really have to disagree with you. I spent a lot of time with this topic.
I'm open-minded. You are not, and we're out of time, unfortunately.
So,
thank you for joining us.
You guys are the mainstream media. And I can tell you why they're leaks. Because the president has created 2 factions in his administration. They don't like each other. So they leak. It's not from the outside, it's from the inside. Carry on, Mr. Carlson. I'm sure we will cross paths again.
That's a very ominous thing to say. I don't know what it means, but come back anytime.
In the atmosphere at an extraordinary rate.
What Bill Nye just did was waste everyone's time explaining that CO2 is rising. Bill Nye is just going around saying CO2 is up, therefore global warming is dangerous, we should be concerned. It's not. It's not dangerous.
The world is getting warmer. It's continually getting warmer.
If I'm right, the reversals will lead to a degree and a half cooling. If you're right, they're not. But what are we worried about right now?
Okay.
We have this increasing anti-science movement in the United States.
Our president is worried about global warming. What a ridiculous situation.
All right, that was Donald Trump calling out President Obama. It seems our commander-in-chief...
It's worse than ever. The anti-science movement is more powerful than it's ever been.
Charles Darwin never thought of evolution as anything other than a theory. He hoped that someday it would be proven by the fossil record, but did not live to see that, nor have we.
The longer we put off doing something about it, the more serious it's just going to get.
Those who try circumvent scientific truth and facts by creating contradictory opinions, these techniques of hiring non-truth-sayers are known as the harbingers of doubt. Highly paid media heads are constantly streaming counter-opinions designed and tailored to change your perception, flooding your mind with nonsense counter-opinions presented to you like they were facts.
Climate scientist, but you're a very distinguished scientist and astrophysicist. What do you think about when people say, look, this is not settled science, there are still questions? I sometimes think to myself, look, there are a lot of questions still about Einstein's theories that led to nuclear fission, but we still know that nuclear power plants do operate and they do provide electricity.
Yeah, so what's happening here is there are people who have cultural, political, religious, economic philosophies that they then invoke when they want to cherry pick one scientific result or another. You can find a scientific paper that says practically anything. And the press, which I count you as part of, the press will sometimes find a single paper and say, oh, here's a new truth. If this study holds it, but an emergent scientific truth, for it to become an objective truth, a truth that is true whether or not you believe in it, it requires more than one scientific paper. It requires a whole system of people's research, all leaning in the same direction, all pointing to the same consequences. That's what we have with climate change as induced by human conduct. This is a known correspondence. If you want to find the 3% of the papers or the 1% of the papers that conflicted with this and build policy on that, that is simply irresponsible. And how else do you establish a scientific truth if not by looking at the consensus of scientific experiments and scientific observations? Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, signed into law in 1963, a year when he had important things to be thinking about. He signed into law the National Academy of Sciences because he knew that science mattered and should matter in governance.
And you know, we build our cities on the basis of science. When we fall ill, we don't go to the local witch doctor.
Right.
We go to a doctor, even though all of that science is still, you know, I mean, there are advances going to be made. None of it is settled in the sense.
Well, so you know what is settled? You know what is settled? Settled science is the science that has come out of large bodies of research that all agree. Right. When you see scientists arguing, and I tweeted, I said, if you think scientists want to always agree with one another, you've never been to a scientific conference, because people are duking it out. But what are they fighting over? Not the settled science that's been in the books. We're fighting over the bleeding edge of what is not yet known. And that is the natural course of science. Now, if you, as a journalist, want to eavesdrop on that meeting, you'll think scientists don't know anything about anything. But it's the body of knowledge that is accumulated over the decades that precedes this that becomes the canon of what, if you're going to base policy and legislation on, that's what you should be thinking about.
So you would say this is a moment to listen to climate science.
I think this 50 inches of, I can't even picture 50, how many raindrops is that? 50 inches of rain in Houston. This is a shot across our bow. A hurricane the width of Florida going up the center of Florida. These are shots across our bow. At what will it take for people to recognize that a community of scientists are learning objective truths about the natural world and that you can benefit from knowing about it? Even news reports on this channel talked about the fact that we have fewer deaths per hurricane. Why? Because you now know weeks in advance. We have models that have trajectories of hurricanes. In decades gone by, it was like, there's a hurricane there, we don't know. Should I stay? Should I go? And then you stay and you die, okay? So to cherry pick science, it's an odd thing for a scientist to observe. And I didn't grow up in a country where that was a common phenomenon. We went to the moon and people knew science and technology fed those discoveries. And the day two politicians are arguing about whether science is true, it means nothing gets done. Nothing. It's the beginning of the end of an informed democracy, as I've said many times. What I'd rather happen is you recognize what is scientifically truth, then you have your political debate. So in the case of energy policy, whatever, it's you don't ask, is the science right? You ask, should we have carbon credits or tariffs?
What's the right response?
Exactly. What is the economic dimension of this? That's where the politics needs to come in, and it's not. The longer we delay, the more I worry that we might not be able to recover from this, because all our greatest cities are on the oceans and water's edges, historically for commerce and transportation. And as storms kick in, as water levels rise, they are the first to go. And we don't have a system, we don't have a civilization with the capacity to pick up a city and move it inland 20 miles. This is happening faster than our ability to respond. That could have huge economic consequences.
On that sobering note, Neil deGrasse Tyson, always a pleasure. And we are in a hurry to read the book.
It is not uncommon for these floppy heads to use the analogy of education to persuade you that what they're talking about has true merit. I personally blame these harbingers of doubt for creating a state of unrest deep inside our suburban culture, those who haven't been properly presented with the facts easily becoming brainwashed and adopt violent ideologies.
You go! I'm filming you. Oh, I'm gonna hurt you. You hurt me. You have a mask on. Oh, shit.
Oh, shit. He's bleeding. Yo. Hey, medic! He's bleeding. Hard. Yo, he's bleeding bad.
Agreeing with labels for the robbers. Just go, please. I will do it for you out of respect. Thank you very much. You notice that they attacked me. I was just standing here asking questions. How am I racist? I want to know how. I was just trying to record the whole thing, and then somebody attacked me from behind.
I just watched you.
Yeah.
Talking to people.
Look,
I'm not going to babysit you all day. I ain't got time for it.
No, you don't. No, absolutely. All right. Have a good day. You have a better one, sir.
Hey, no pictures, big boy.
Hanging out. What's he doing?
Come on, right here.
Hey.
Kill all Nazis! Kill all Nazis! Kill all Nazis! Kill all Nazis! Kill all
Chris, come on, let's go.
Yeah, go! Chris! Bye, Chris!
So if someone there was open to having a reasonable conversation to see...
We haven't been extended that offer, so we aren't taking it. That's the thing. We're here to promote our vision of the future, and they can promote theirs out there.
But you would be open to that invitation if it was presented?
I mean, we don't see violence as the only option, unless they do.
Trump for us is a principle. We like the principles he got elected on. What he's done since that time, we have some things we agree with. He's made very good moves in the immigration issue. He's made very good moves on trade issues and on jobs in America. He's made good issues on these things, and he's made a great issue and a move with Sessions. We supported Sessions, we supported Trump, and the idea that we're going to stop discrimination, racial discrimination against white people in this country is an idea that's got to be fulfilled.
Through the world's perspective, America is becoming increasingly more violent and over-politicized. We are becoming a laughingstock for many.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to the American people tonight about how we can end this shutdown and meet the needs of the American people. Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear. We want to start with the facts. The fact is, on the very first day of this Congress, House Democrats passed Senate Republican legislation to reopen government and fund smart, effective border security solutions.
The presidential palace, the party of the year. Eyes bright, chins up, smiles on.
But the president is rejecting these bipartisan bills which would reopen government over his obsession with forcing American taxpayers to waste billions of dollars on an expensive and ineffective wall, a wall he always promised Mexico would pay for. The fact is, President Trump has chosen to hold hostage critical services for the health, safety, and well-being of the American people.
Now there'll be photographers, interviews, everyone will be here to celebrate you, my victors. Breathe it all in, children.
And withhold the paychecks of 800,000 innocent workers across the nation, many of them veterans. He promised to keep government shut down for months or years, no matter whom it hurts. That's just plain wrong. The fact is, we all agree we need to secure our borders while honoring our values.
U.S. Border Protection. How can I help you?
Pues sí, you can help me. Devuélveme mi trabajo. ¿Qué hiciste? ¿Qué hiciste, cabrón? ¡Me destrozaste el coche, pinche gringo!
Thanks for your collaboration. And remember, don't come back again.
¡Y el gringo nos quiere cobrar el muro! ¡Dile que no, pinche gringo racista! Pues no te pagaremos nada.
Wait a minute, please.
Señor Trump, mire, somos gente honrada y solo queremos pedirle que...
They don't know it yet, but they're going to pay for them. We will begin working on an inflexible, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall.
Speaker Pelosi, my fellow Americans, we address you tonight for one reason only. The President of the United States, having failed to get Mexico to pay for his ineffective, unnecessary border wall, and unable to convince the Congress or the American people to foot the bill, has shut down the government. American democracy doesn't work that way. We don't govern by temper tantrum.
Good, good. Good. Before you came, I was all alone. It is bad to be alone. Alone. Bad. Friend. Good. Friend. Good.
Farmers and small businesses won't get loans they desperately need. Most presidents have used Oval Office addresses for noble purposes. This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention from the turmoil in his administration.
You very rarely see this, and it's going to get a lot worse. This is the border fence between Mexico and the United States. Migrants from the newly arriving caravans in Tijuana scaling the steel railings. They're inches away from America and San Diego in the distance. In truth, if they jump, they'll be caught in seconds, unless, of course, hundreds do so at the same time. And that's a fact the US Border Patrol, watching in cars and on horseback and quad bike, are fully aware of. The sounds of patrolling helicopters are never far away anymore, and this is unusual. The border fence is monitored and patrolled every day of the year, of course, but the migrant caravans, the rhetoric of President Trump, and his military deployment here has raised the stakes. If America's wary of the migrants, some in Tijuana are firmly against them. A crowd attempted to demonstrate against the caravan members outside their camp in a sports complex. They were prevented by rows of police and they simply couldn't get down the street. Face to face, they accused the police of protecting the wrong people. The mayor of Tijuana has echoed the United States president in saying that he wants to turn them away.
But this is what the authorities have been worried about, of course. This isn't a very big demonstration, but there are a lot more migrants due to arrive here shortly, and the police are worried about clashes between those people from Tijuana who are against migrants coming here, the migrants themselves, and of course the police find themselves stuck in the middle.
But not everyone is against the migrants. These women are shouting at the protesters to clear off. Scuffles break out. The locals say that the caravan is actually bringing their small shops new business. Inside the sports complex, the migrants spend a lot of time sleeping. Many are exhausted. They've travelled thousands of miles to get here. By and large, they want to claim asylum in the United States. Most are escaping endemic crime and poverty in their Central and South American countries. Half are children. Some of them are very tiny indeed. Juana was born on the journey north. She's a month and 17 days old. Her mother, Olinda, and dad, Juan, are escaping the El Salvadorian gang MS-13, who want to kill the couple for informing on a gangster who murdered 2 people. That gang member is Olinda's brother.
Voy a aplicar para asilo, porque no puedo estar ni en El Salvador, ni en Honduras, ni en Guatemala. Aún ni aquí en México, porque aquí en México hay pandillas de las mismas de las que depende mi hermano. Y como lo entregué y le dieron 25 años de prisión, mi vida corre peligro.
The movement of people heading north to the United States has gone on for years. But something new is happening. It's said more convoys are forming. Thousands already in Mexico will arrive here soon. There is no way that Mexico can cope. This is difficult at the moment, but very shortly this could turn into a full-scale humanitarian crisis. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Tijuana.
I am Uncle Anonymous and I ask you the viewer to stand up and fight. Let's keep these media heads from flooding our beloved YouTube. Create more anti-media content before they fry the younger minds of the next generation.